Hello, welcome back to History of Wine and the Vine. I'm Emily Kate. So this week we're going to be discussing ancient wine maturation and kind of vintage and cellaring. So the reasons why people cellared wine and aged wine in antiquity are pretty similar to why we do it today. So it was a good investment. There were a lot of specific qualities that they looked for in wine that would make it good for aging. And as well, there was the prestige aspect that's obviously still around today as well. So I have kind of like 3 stories that go along with each quality, and I will share them with you. So in terms of investment, cellaring wine was a good investment in antiquity. So there's a specific year, 121 BC, and this is known as Opimian wine if it came from this year, and that's because Lucius Opimius, that was the year of his consulship. So all the Roman wine that's from 121 BC falls under that title. Now, the wine from that year was apparently, this was the most exceptional, ideal year for winemaking and grape growing. And as a result, the wine from this year was actually cellared at some points for over 2 centuries. And interestingly enough, despite all the qualities that they looked for in that harvest and how wonderful it was, especially because it was the year of the consulship, that wine really grew in price and actually grew 20-fold in price. So a very nice investment if you had made it back then. And we also know that it wasn't just specifically that price because it tasted good after 2 centuries, because we actually have proof that it was kind of the consistency of honey, not really wine, and that it tasted very bitter. So it really was, that 20-fold increase in price really was just this element of cellaring this one special year. So as for quality, there's a work called Geographica, and it's by someone called Strabo, and he was around from about the 60s BC to the 20s AD, and he wrote kind of all about the known world at the time of the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Empire. So he was writing about all these different regions, and he mentioned that in certain regions there were certain that like the possibility of like a really great vintage in that region would mean that the wine would be racked off with a thought of cellaring it. So it would not have been kind of drink now, immediate consumption wine. It would have been specifically created and fermented and everything with in mind, having it be cellared and aged. So they did have specific qualities that they looked for in certain years and vintages in different regions that would make the wine particularly cellar worthy. Then as for prestige, this is kind of a funny story. So Trimalchio, who's a character in Satyricon, which is by Petronius, has a dinner party. And at this dinner party, he actually invites all these people, and he has wine be brought up from his cellar. And the wine says on it, Falernian type of wine. And then it says Consul Opimius, which means it's from that 121 BC. And it also says 100 years old. So no wine is labeled 100 years old because it's not 100 years old when you got it. So clearly this was just to show how important it was and how prestigious it was to offer your guests this wonderful old fancy wine. So nothing really has changed there. In addition, the idea of this aesthetic of old wine being very prestige actually carried through because the amphora that they were using, much like today, how if you might have dust on a bottle, well, they wanted to have kind of soot and dirt, so to speak, and show age on the amphora, because the amphora, if it was kind of looking aged, would be in the banquet room with everybody for a nice meal, and people could admire it and say, oh, look at this person who has this old bottle that has aged this bottle. It was a very desirable thing. So they actually put the amphora, when they first got them, they would put them upstairs instead of in the cellar downstairs where it was cool. Put it upstairs because they had to heat their homes. And when people heated their homes, there would be smoke, and the smoke would kind of get onto the amphora and kind of cause it to be darker and a little ruddier. And because of this, people actually thought that the wine inside would be much older than it was. So we have all of these aspects of wanting to preserve this illusion of age in vintage wine, which is much like today. And what we're going to talk about next lecture is how that changed in the Middle Ages, because as we know, they did not age wine really in the Middle Ages because of the cask and the fact that wine would go bad, so it had to be drank young. So tune in next time and I will see you then. Cheers!